All right, you guys, welcome in. We got One Piece chapter 1116 here in front of us, and you know the drill. We're gonna go down this latest chapter and just talk a little bit about it and have some fun here. So with that being said, my name is Sai. Let's get into it. So to kick things off this week, we are revealed to the fact that an esteemed criminal is on the loose. And if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, I am talking about the Yamato cover page story, because this week we have volume 6 of Yamato's adventure, and we see Yamato receiving some food and some medicine from Otsuru. But if you glance off to the right, you may notice that Urashima, the evil sumo wrestler from the beginning of Wano, is actually hanging out in the background. It kind of shocked me, to be honest, because I felt like this was one of those guys that you would lock up post Onigashima, but no, it looks like they actually let this guy go free, which I guess he wasn't exactly an evil villain, right? His biggest crime was harassing Okiku, working for Orochi, and not to mention he almost attacked Okiku as well, but I believe either Luffy or Zoro stopped him. It was kind of both of them, right? Luffy fought him in the sumo match, and then Okiku kind of just did her thing. But yeah, either way, it is really strange seeing him here. He's not a character I expected to show up in the cover page story, but lo and behold, this is who we got. Outside of Urashima, though, we do see Otsuru. Kind of talked about her already, and you actually get to see the scar that she got from Hold'em, because Hold'em went over to the village, destroyed it, set it on fire. We later come to find out that Otsuru actually survived the fire, but she was left with a pretty nasty scar, which is exactly what we see here in this front page. So that's pretty cool. My only other thoughts about the cover page story is that Oda is 1,000,000% taking his time with it. Oda is in no rush to get anywhere anytime soon, right? You know, last chapter, Yamato was preparing for the adventure. The chapter before that, Yamato was receiving money. And now in this chapter, you know, Yamato's getting medicine. It's like, yo, we are still in the flower capital. We have not moved locations, right? Yamato has to travel all around Wano. There are about 8 to 9 named locations that Yamato has to pass through, and we're still at stop number 0. You know, like, it's pretty funny. But yeah, like, I like this. I like that we're taking our time here, and it's just like how the other cover page stories usually start, right? We always start really slow, and then by the end of it, that's when things get really wacky. And considering the fact that this is taking place in Wano, I am expecting everything to hit the fan by the end of Yamato's journey. Because we have to remember, Yamato just so happens to be in Wano, which houses Pluton, one of the 3 ancient weapons, and also one of the 4 road poneglyphs. And not to mention, you know, Wano is a lawless land, so pirates could pretty much just enter here, and the world government and marines won't even bat an eye to it. So yeah, I'm expecting some pretty big things by the end of this cover page story. You know, ancient weapon, road poneglyph, maybe even the conclusion of Big Mom and Kaido. You know, I feel like there's a lot of cards that Oda can pull out of his pocket, and I am definitely looking forward to it. So now, on to the first page of the chapter, and let me tell you, Oda is starting pretty hard in my book. So, you know, we have Vegapunk's message, and while it's playing, we have civilians from around the world. Let me see. We don't actually know what country they're from. Yeah, it's kind of like undisclosed, but they're like, hey, Vegapunk, what the hell is going on here? What are you talking about? How is the war still going on if no one from 800 years ago is actually still alive? And while we're getting that dialogue, Oda switches over from the civilians and shows us Imu, you know? Like, so it's pretty on the nose that Oda is trying to insinuate that Imu is indeed from the Void Century, and Imu is 800 plus years old, which is something that a lot of people already believed in, right? You know, if you were to tell somebody that Imu is from the Void Century, there is like a 99% chance that they would just shake their head and agree with you. So yeah, the paneling really does make it feel that way. And while we're getting this dialogue, Imu is walking around the flower garden as per usual. But this time around, they go to the edge of the room, and over there on that wall, it's a picture of Queen Lily. Well, we assume it's Queen Lily, but let's be real here. Who else would it be, right? It looks like Vivi. it's not exactly Vivi, so it's probably Queen Lily, right? Like, it's a process of elimination type of thing. And plus, not to mention, the flowers in that room do resemble lilies. So the chances of this being Queen Lily are pretty damn high in my opinion. So now, Queen Lily and Emu, what was their relationship like? Because this is where things get a little bit murky. Because coming into this chapter, I thought that Emu wasn't a big fan of Queen Lily. But now that we're here, you know, Emu has a picture of Lily in his room. It's like, okay, you know, like, you don't have a picture of somebody you hate in your flower garden. That's just usually not the case. So, you know, from what we know about Lily so far, Lily 800 years ago helped Emu and 18 other kings and queens take down Joy Boy. But Lily ended up betraying the 19 other kings and queens by spreading the poneglyphs around the world. So you would think that Emu would hate Lily. But here we have it, you know, Emu is still thinking about Lily to this very day. So it kind of makes me wonder if they were a thing. You know, was this a relationship? Did Emu have a crush on Lily? Or were they just really good nakama? I have no clue, man. Like, you know, this explains so much, though. This explains why Emu wants Vivi alive. Because, you know, with the information that Vivi has, which is very little, right? Vivi didn't know that her dad died to Emu until afterwards, after she met Wapol. But, you know, like, if you wanted to get rid of somebody, it's easier to just assassinate them. But for some reason, Emu wants to capture Vivi unharmed. And it's like, okay, like, what is going on here? Like, why does Emu want Vivi? Is it because Vivi looks like Queen Lily? Seems like that's the case, right? He wants to, like, rekindle his love, or I don't know, maybe just reminisce by looking at Vivi. I'm not too sure, because even going back to when Emu was slashing posters up, he slashed over so many posters, he stabbed so many pictures, but he didn't do that to Vivi's poster, and it makes so much sense now. This just makes me really excited for Emu's backstory. I want to see his lost love, if that's what this is, of course. I'm just kind of making that guess. But also, we don't know if Emu is a guy or a girl yet. That's still up in the air, but now that we have some sort of inclination to believe that Emu is indeed the same Emu from the Void Century, we could put more weight on what Ivankov said when they talked about Emu Neurona, because they said Emu Neurona Se, which is the male honorific for celestial dragons. So I do think there is a chance that this is a guy. You know, I'm starting to switch sides, right? At first I thought Emu could be a woman. I'm starting to believe it's a guy now. You know, just me. But hey, I would love to hear what you guys have to say down below. Where do you fall on Emu's gender reveal? So moving on to the very next thing. Actually, wait, one more detail about Emu that I want to talk about. But in the third panel, or the second panel of this chapter, when we see Emu in the flower room, is it just me, or does the ground look a little bit weird to you? It kind of looks like, how would I describe it? It looks like tile, right? It looks like tile. Because beforehand, the flower room had like grass and greenery, flowers, but now the flowers are only on the outside, and it looks like the middle ground has maybe changed up a little bit. I don't know. I don't remember seeing these lines straight down, and I even went back to the anime to look at the flower room, and it was grass, you know, it wasn't tile. I mean, it's like a small detail, could be an accident, could be nothing, but I did want to point that out. So moving on to the next page though, we cut over to Alabasta, and we see Ingram and Karu, and they are sobbing over the fact that Vivi is missing, and I'm actually surprised they're not doing anything, right? Karu is actually, I was about to say a decent fighter. He's not a decent fighter, but he is a supersonic duck. So I think he could be pretty useful when it comes to searching for Vivi. And then Ingram. We know Ingram is a fighter. He was a part of Baroque Works for a good minute. So I'm surprised these guys haven't set sail yet to look for Vivi. Maybe problems at home are just too bad. Because you gotta remember, like, they lost Vivi, and they also lost King Cobra in the span of one reverie. So I'm assuming the country is in turmoil right now, and maybe Ingram and Karu are just really needed here at home. Another thing we see is King Cobra's funeral. So we see his tomb, and I'm not gonna lie, but I did laugh a little bit when we saw this panel, because King Cobra in his funeral portrait is actually giving us the widest smile known to mankind. He's hitting us with one of these. Right? Like, it's kind of funny because King Cobra, from what I remember, has never really smiled at all. So seeing him so happy here is kind of crazy. But also, this could this is a stretch, but I did want to point it out. But this could tie in with the whole thing where it's like, hey, you know, people who have the will of D, they always smile in their final moments. Cobra didn't exactly smile when he died to Emu, but at least he's smiling here. A cool detail about King Cobra's tomb is that in the background, engraved in the wall, is an image of a jackal and a falcon, which is, of course, symbolic of Chaka and Pell, since they are his bodyguards, and they have those corresponding devil fruits, which is pretty cool. Kind of makes you wonder if they'll do anything ever, right? Like, no offense, I know, like, they weren't present in the room, but we haven't really seen them do much at all throughout the series. So I'm excited to see what they're gonna do in the future. You know, will they go on the hunt for Vivi? Will they perhaps go after the Revolutionary Army? I'm not too sure, because we do have to remember that the world government and the newspaper, you know, Big News Morgans, they printed that Sabo assassinated King Cobra. I'm not too sure if the Alabasta citizens believe that or not, but if they do, then we could see Alabasta versus the Revolutionary Army, which would be kind of cursed in my opinion. But yeah, that would be an interesting misunderstanding. But maybe after hearing all this news that Vegapunk is dropping, maybe they're gonna believe that the world government might actually be the true culprits of the whole thing, since they're being painted in a very negative light. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about Alabasta. What do you think they're gonna do? Do you think they'll hunt Vivi, go after the Revs, or no, do you think they have enough problems here at home? So now, moving on to the next page, Vegapunk talks about how amazing the Mother Flame truly is, and how very soon the entire world will be able to tap into this energy source. But it does make me wonder how, right? Now that Vegapunk is dead, how will he distribute the Mother Flame? Because York is definitely not going to do it. Edison is damn near dead. The only people that can really carry on Vegapunk's legacy is maybe Kizaru, which I know is a crazy one to throw out there. We also have Lilith, and we also have Atlas. And out of all of them, I'm not too sure if they're going to carry on Vegapunk's legacy. You know, like, how is he going to do this? But then again, Vegapunk is a genius, right? We learned in this chapter that he calculated a lot of things that have happened thus far, so I wouldn't exactly be super surprised if he had a blueprint for the future where somebody else takes up the fire mantle. So after he drops that line on us, we see that the Seraphim have officially been grounded on the Fabrio phase along with the Cypher Pole agents. And to my surprise, the Seraphim are still in their bubbles. The fall did not break it, which does make a lot of sense, right? If cannonballs can't break the bubbles, then of course, I don't think a fall should either. But yeah, we see the Boa Hancock Seraphim still trapped there. All the Cypher Pole agents are currently, they seem like they're unconscious right now because they just took a mighty fall. Like, you gotta remember, these guys fell from a sky island. We're talking about meters and meters in the air. So I'm surprised some of these guys are even still alive, to be honest. But yeah, they're now down here, and it makes me wonder if anybody's going to free them, right? Because Saturn, from what we know of, is up in the Labo phase still. Venus is in the sky. Mars is in the sky. Warkity is chasing Luffy. And then Jupiter is doing worm things. So it does make me wonder if one of the Gorosei will take the time out of their busy schedule to go to the Seraphim, release them, and then give them orders, right? I don't know who would do it. Maybe Venus would, since Venus is currently in the air and he's the one who brought them down in the first place. And I think Venus could cut the bubbles, right? If there were to be a Gorosei member that could get rid of the bubbles, I think it would make sense if it was Venus, since he is a swordsman, right? And usually when you think of a bubble and how to pop it, you usually think of a sharp object. And I think Venus fits that bill pretty dang well. So yeah, so that's going on the side. And then we cut over to Stussy. And Stussy is having a conversation with Edison. And Edison's like, hey, Stussy, you really need to get out of there, right? Like, the Seraphim have landed on the ground. The Gorosei are running rampant. You need to leave. But before Stussy takes her leave, she asks Edison a serious question. She says, hey, Edison, would it be okay if I were to free Kaku? And I was a little bit shocked, you know? Like, I was like, Kaku? You mean the assassin who was sent here to kill Vegapunk? You want to release that guy? the guy who's in the bubble? The guy whose partner actually stabbed you with a finger gun? Yeah, it was pretty crazy, but it makes a lot of sense, right? Because Stussy, while she was always working for Vegapunk undercover, she did spend 20 years with Cypherpole. I don't know how long she knew Kaku, right? Maybe just 2 years during the time skip. But if she knew Kaku well before that even, it makes sense why she would want to help him out. Even Rob Lucci to an extent, right? In a weird way, they are her Nakama. So yeah, she wants to release Kaku, and she goes on and says, hey, I know what Kaku's going to do after I let him out. I don't think he'll be a problem anymore. And, you know, Kaku is listening into this entire conversation, and you can see that he feels kind of bad, right? Like, the bottom right panel where we see Kaku, he looks kind of distraught. He's frowning, you know, like, he's like, damn, dude, like, if Kaku were to lay hands on Stussy after she vouched for him like this, I don't know how he'd be able to go to sleep at night, right? So yeah, in my opinion, I really like this development because it perfectly wraps up Stussy's story. Because back in the Kuma flashback, she was questioning her own value compared to a human, compared to Kuma, compared to AI. And it's nice seeing that Edison in this page is like, hey, Stussy, the fact that you want to help Vegapunk, but also still help Cypherpole Zero despite everything, shows that at the end of the day, you have a little bit of human in you too. And Stussy, hearing those words, actually starts crying a little bit, and it's just really wholesome, man. But yeah, next chapter, I'm going to assume that Kaku is going to be freed, and as far as what he's going to do now, I'm assuming he's going to save Rob Lucci #1, because I don't think Rob Lucci can really move anymore. So I think saving Rob Lucci will be the main priority. And then after that, he's most likely going to go downstairs and then help the rest of the Cypherpole agents and then just get the hell out of this island, because everything on this island is falling apart. And, you know, having Kaku save the Cypherpole agents and Lucci would tie up what the Marines have been talking about for the past 2 chapters now, because they have been talking about saving the Cypherpole agents. Hell, even, I think, is it the first page? Let me see. Second page. No, third page. Sorry, I'm bad at counting. On the 3rd page of this chapter, we have Marines talking about how they can't get to the center of the island and they can't save the Cypherpole agents. If we free Kaku and if he fulfills that role, that would, in my opinion, perfectly wrap up that storyline. So I could totally see him doing that. And like I said, if he were to betray Stussy now, go after her, go after the Straw Hats after this wholehearted speech, I don't know, man. You know, in my top 30, I might have to knock down Kaku a few spots, man. But yeah, after we see Stussy and Kaku, Vegapunk starts talking about Leloucia and how an ancient weapon and a person were responsible for its destruction. And we see the Revolutionary Army, you know, they're listening in intently. We see Moda, who was a civilian of Leloucia. We even see I believe he's a Marine-based G2 Vice Admiral who was canon, but he was only shown in like a cover page story. But apparently this guy makes an appearance, you know, Komil is his name. And I'm just gonna say right here, but Vice Admiral Komil has a super tough design, and I'm excited to see what Oda's gonna cook up with him in the future, you know? Like, hey, the Vice Admirals here on Egghead Island haven't been performing that well, but eventually, I think a Vice Admiral is gonna get a major W. And who better to get that W than Vice Admiral Komil? So jokes aside, one cool thing about Vice Admiral Komil that I kind of noticed here is that he is drinking tea while he's listening to this broadcast. And the reason why that's notable is because all of the Vice Admirals have names that are a play or a riff on something that actually exists, right? Like Doberman is after a dog. Red King is a guy from, I think, like Godzilla or some old school Power Rangers show. Sorry, I like completely blanked on that one. Bluegrass is a reference to bluegrass music. So when it comes to Komil, I think it's a play on chamomile, like chamomile tea. And that is probably what he's drinking here. But of course, that is just a guess. I'm not too sure who this loser is at the end of the day. So we move on though, and we see King Elizabello III and Dagama. You know, these guys were awesome back in Dressrosa. Elizabello, if you guys forgot, has a punch so strong that it is rumored to be able to take down a Yonko in a single blow. I think that's a lie, but hey, I thought that was really hype when we first met him, and that's why I really like Elizabello. But yeah, we see him, and after hearing the news about Leloucia, he sends his strategist Dagama to go and verify this news at once, which I don't blame him, dude. Like, this entire story that Vegapunk is dropping on us, it seems ridiculous. Even though we have the rising waters and everything going on, it still seems ludicrous. So, you know, if you hear that your next door neighbor has been evaporated, you gotta check, dude. You're like, I don't blame him. And it's pretty cool that we're seeing him in this chapter as well. The next people we see are actually the people of Baltimore. So Vegapunk goes on in the message and he starts apologizing, saying, hey guys, I am responsible for the genocide of Leloucia, right? I'm an accomplice in that event because I'm the one who created the Mother Flame and also allowed the Mother Flame to be stolen. So the citizens of Baltimore are like, no, Vegapunk, you know, you didn't mean it. You know, you're a great guy. And then we go down a little bit more, and then we see Momonosuke's reaction. And Oda cuts Momonosuke off before he can say what he's about to say. So Momonosuke says, so you're telling me that Pluton is ... and then Kinemon cuts him off. So it makes me wonder what he was going to say. Was he going to say Pluton is able to sink the world? Or was he going to say Pluton could be fueled by the Mother Flame? And the reason I say the Mother Flame thing is because this is in the same panel where Vegapunk is apologizing for the Mother Flame. Or maybe he's like, hey, wait, you're telling me Pluton is able to destroy islands like Leloucia, because that was the page before. I'm not exactly super sure. I would love to hear what you guys have to say about this. What do you think Momonosuke was going to say in relation to Pluton? Of course, it could be something that we know of already, like, oh, you're telling me Pluton is an ancient weapon capable of mass destruction, or do you think it's going to be some brand new information that maybe ties it in with the Mother Flame? We'll love to hear what you guys have to say, but right now, I am just like Tama, who is in that panel as well, right? Kinemon's telling Momonosuke to hush up, and then you have Otama with a giant question mark above her head. That's me right now. So what's fun about this is that after we see Momonosuke talking about Pluton, we cut over to Crocodile, and we don't actually see where he's at. You know, Oda, classic Oda, keeping his cards close to his chest, because when we see that Crocodile panel, he actually blacks out his background. Let me just scroll up real quick on the side. Brother, we see a lot of people reacting to this news, but not once has there ever been a reaction panel. I'm gonna scroll down too. Yeah, no reaction panel has ever been blacked out in the background. So it makes me wonder if Crocodile is in a different location. Maybe he's listening to this message in a dark room. Not too sure, but I do love how Oda squeezed Crocodile in right here, right after Pluton, because back in Alabasta, Crocodile was gung-ho after Pluton. That is why he wanted to overthrow King Cobra. That is why he hired Nico Robin. That is why he had Baroque Works. He wanted an ancient weapon so that he could, you know, rule the world or create his utopia. So it does make me wonder if he's going to go after an ancient weapon now. And if he does, I do wonder if he'll go after Pluton or if he'll go after Poseidon or Uranus. Because beforehand, Crocodile didn't know about the other ancient weapons. The only one he told us about was Pluton. So now that more options have sprung up for him, I wonder what he's going to do now. But then again, Buggy does have his ridiculous plan of becoming Pirate King, so maybe by going to Wano to get the Road Poneglyph, he will run into Pluton accidentally, because the Road Poneglyph is near Ancient Wano, and in Ancient Wano is Pluton. So it could be like a 2-in-1 kind of deal. And that's why I do like bringing Crocodile in, or Crossguild in, into Yamato's cover page story. But the same could be said for the Blackbeard Pirates, since they do have Caribou and his intel that Pluton exists within Wano and that Shirahoshi is Poseidon, right? A lot of things can happen here, but the way I view Vegapunk's message and the past couple of chapters is that Vegapunk is pulling a Gold D. Roger, right? He's pulling a Whitebeard. Whenever they died, they said, hey guys, the One Piece is real. It's out there. My treasure's out there. Go out and go look for it. That is essentially what Vegapunk is doing right now, but with the ancient weapons, right? Like, who wouldn't want one of these bad boys in their arsenal? So yeah, I am excited to see what the arms race is going to look like in the future, and I do believe that Crocodile will play a key role in that hunt, because, you know, Crocodile was the very first character who brought up the notion of ancient weapons in the first place, right? Crocodile devoted over 20 years of his life hunting for these ancient weapons. So I'd be damned if Crocodile doesn't at least get to see one, you know? So Crocodile, Looking forward to it. So, funny enough, going on, the next place we cut to is Fishman Island, and we see Shirahoshi along with their father also listening into the news. We've seen them before, and then we cut over to the next group, and we see Sengoku and Tsuru. And Sengoku is a little bit stressed, right? You know, he's stressed listening to this message. He is stuffing his mouth full of rice crackers, and it's pretty funny. What I really like about Sengoku's inclusion here is that it's another display of how well Oda has been paneling this chapter, right? You know, in the beginning of the chapter, we had the whole thing like, oh, you know, who from 800 years ago is still alive? And then we see Emu, right? And then we cut over here, and Vegapunk is talking about the ancient weapons. And what do we see? We see Momonosuke talking about Pluton, Shirahoshi being Poseidon as the next one, and then we have Sengoku and Tsuru, top brass of the Marines, and we do know that the Marines in the world government have Uranus. So, you know, it's like Oda is showcasing the different factions who own each weapon. But yeah, what's cool about Sengoku and Tsuru, though, minus that aspect, is the fact that we see that they have set sail. Last we saw, they were at Marine HQ. You know, they were at Marine HQ talking about Garp, talking about Cross Guild, and then in this chapter, we see that they are on a boat. Brother, where are they going, man? Where are these guys going? Are they going to save Garp from Blackbeard, or do you think they are going to Cross Guild to put an end to marine hunting? I would love to hear what you guys have to say. But yeah, it was a really small add-in. Like, to the right, like, I don't think a lot of people will notice this, but to the right of Sengoku is a small panel where you see the battleship. So, you know, they're going somewhere, man. They are going somewhere. If I were to place my bet on one or the other, though, I think I would lean more towards Sengoku and Tsuru going to save Garp. Because they've known Garp for, like, what, 40 plus years? They're close Nakama. They're from the same era. And they were shocked when they heard that Kujaku and the rest of Sword were going to save him. So I wouldn't be surprised if they want to see the outcome of that. And I wouldn't be surprised if they want to get Garp out of his executioner, his ice cube. And plus, we could get a really cool interaction between Sengoku and Kuzan as well. Because we do know that Sengoku, who was advocating that Kuzan becomes the next fleet admiral. And then, of course, Akainu fought him, and then Akainu won, then he became fleet admiral. So we could get a pretty cool thing there. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about that. Where do you think Sengoku and Tsuru are heading off to? But now, moving on though, the next place we get to see is Marine HQ. Akainu is also pretty mad that Vegapunk is letting all this information spill loose. And this actually ties back to Sengoku being really stressed about this message. It shows that the fleet admirals of the Navy know about the existence of ancient weapons and maybe even what actually happened at La Lucia. And the reason why we can infer this is because the reactions we get from Akainu and Sengoku is vastly different from that of the other Marines, right? Every single Marine we've seen thus far that are not them are like, holy hell, the world government did that? Wait, La Lucia? Ancient weapons, right? Like, they're all super confused about this news. But Akainu is like, yo, Vegapunk, so you're gonna say everything, huh? You know, like Sengoku's over here stress eating. So yeah, I think once you become the fleet admiral, you become privy to all of this information, which I think is a really interesting development because, you know, coming into this chapter, I was a firm believer that the Marines would not be a big fan of the world government if the world government is planning to sink the world, right? Like, believe it or not, the Marines are not the same as the Celestial Dragons. The Celestial Dragons live up at the top of the red line. They're not going to be affected by the rising waters. Well, they are because, you know, seaquakes are still happening and they're not going to be too happy about it, and they're also going to lose out on all of their heavenly tributes, but they will survive. But the Marines, on the other hand, they won't. You know, they live down there with the common folk. They have friends, they have families who are not Celestial Dragons. So I was always of the mindset that, you know, after this message is done, they're going to point their guns at the world government. But that will get a little bit weird, though, if the fleet admirals, like Akainu, are okay with all of this happening. And I think Akainu is going to be a key factor when it comes to the future of the Marines. I mean, of course, because he's the fleet admiral. But yeah, like, I don't know where he's going to stand after this, right? Like, sure, let's say he knew about the ancient weapons before this chapter. Maybe he didn't know that the world government would use it to sink the world, though. Maybe he didn't know the repercussions of it, right? Maybe he was like, oh, you know, they have Uranus. It can destroy islands. No big deal, right? Like, if they want to destroy Lelucia, go for it. But maybe after learning that eventually the whole world is going to die, maybe that's where Akainu draws the line. I don't know. I'm really iffy when it comes to this. And here's the thing, too. Even if Akainu still follows the world government, how many Marines will actually follow him, right? Like, would every Marine throw their life down to help the Celestial Dragons? I don't think so, right? Fujitora might not be on board. You know, Smoker, wherever he's at, might not be on board. The Marines here on Egghead aren't even on board, right? Like, I don't know. There's a lot of weird things going on here. And this is what I really like about One Piece, right? Just because you are locked into one faction doesn't mean you can't have differing opinions. I mean, that's why we have Sword. That's why we have Kobe. So yeah, pretty soon, a lot of Marines are going to have to make a definite stance on where they stand in the world, right? Are you going to stand with your buddies alongside the world government? Or are you going to stand by the common day civilian? Because at the end of the day, not every Marine likes the Celestial Dragons. So it is going to be really interesting to see how Oda plays this out. So now, moving on with Vegapunk's message, the next thing he talks about are the Roger Pirates. He's like, yo, one thing I do not understand are the acts of a specific group in the world. A group that knew everything about the history of the Void Century, yet they did not do anything about it. I'm talking about the Roger Pirates. And that is when we see Crocus and Laboon, you know, Crocus hitting us with a ... We see, oh God, we see a disgusting panel of the long-armed tribe that are listening in on this message. And then we also see Rayleigh at the very end. And it's like, yo, the Roger Pirates, man, what were they doing? Did they make a bad decision? Did they side with the world government? Why didn't they do anything? And here's the thing. I've been seeing a lot of people taking dunks on the Roger Pirates and making fun of them. And personally, I really like it because I like a good laugh. But outside of the jokes, though, I will push back on it because I believe the Roger Pirates were working against the clock, right? Because when Roger made it to Laugh Tale, a notable thing he said was that they were too early. You know, they showed up way too early. Another thing that they keep in mind is Toki's prophecy, right? She said it would be 20 years until Wano is freed and the borders will open. Roger was 20 years prior to that, right? He was not in time for that either. By the time Roger reached Laugh Tale, he only had like 2 years left to live. So Roger going down and changing the entire world after that while he was sick just wasn't really possible. And then going back to the timeline thing too, but Shirahoshi wasn't even of age yet, or even born, if I recall correctly. You know, Shirahoshi wasn't around, and she is an ancient weapon. She is a key factor when it comes to this Void Century war, right? She is an ancient weapon. You know, like, Roger was not born in the right era. Like, if anything, I kind of feel bad for Roger. Like, he beat the entire game, right? He beat all the bosses, he did everything, and then it's announced that DLC is coming. You know, Shadow of the Air Tree drops next month, and Roger's getting ready to play it. He wants to sink his teeth into it, but he was just born in the wrong era, right? He dies next week. Like, it's not fair to him to, you know, rag on him because of when he was born and what he was dealt with. But yeah, it's an interesting situation here. And at the end of the chapter, when we see Rayleigh, he is drunk out of his mind. Rayleigh always drinks, but we've never seen Rayleigh this drunk where his head is literally on the table. So it makes me wonder if come next chapter, Rayleigh is going to reminisce about his old era, and who knows, we might get a Gold Roger flashback out of it. Oh yeah, another thing that could allude to the fact that Roger wasn't born in the right time was Shanks's reaction, right? After Roger came back from Laugh Tale, he told Shanks something. They had a private conversation, we don't know what it's about, and by the end of it, Shanks started bawling his eyes out. You know, Shanks was crying. And then Shanks afterwards was like, hey, Buggy, I'm not going to go after the One Piece, right? Like, he told him that. And it's like, yo, like, why did Shanks say that? What did Roger say to him? Was it timing? I think so, right? Because Shanks, all the way from that point until this final saga, did not once go after the One Piece. Shanks must have been waiting for something, and he was probably waiting for the same thing that Goldie Roger needed at his time. Maybe that was the Sun God Nika fruit. Maybe it was the maturing of the ancient weapons. Not too sure. It could even be both. But yeah, rest in peace, Roger, man. You know, if only he was born in this era, dude. One thing that I did find interesting, though, is that Rayleigh said that Vegapunk has already said way too much and that he shouldn't ruin the young people's fun. And it's like, okay, I agree with Rayleigh, right? You don't want to spill too many beans because that would ruin Robin's adventure. Robin set out to sea to find the poneglyphs. Luffy is all about learning things for himself, and that makes sense in that regard. But you also have to take in consideration that Vegapunk is warning people that the world is going to end any day now. So it's like, okay, like, why did Rayleigh say this? I feel like there might be a greater reasoning to this. Like, for a second, just imagine what it would be like if Vegapunk didn't broadcast a message that the world is going to sink, right? Like, imagine that for 1 second. You live on an island, you have a nice, loving family, you got 3 daughters, 2 sons, you got a nice wife, you know, your cousin is staying over in the same household, and then you go to sleep one night, right? You just had some nice pot roast, you're feeling great, you're sleeping soundly. And then you wake up, and guess what you see? You see your family. They're all dead. They're dead in the living room. You know why? Because they drowned, and you had no idea this was happening. Like, that is what Vegapunk's message will save people from. And it makes me wonder why Rayleigh didn't want this information to go out. I understand the whole thing of, you know, not ruining the adventure, but it's like a give and take, right? Like, Vegapunk hasn't spoiled too much. You know, he didn't say what's at Laugh Tale. He didn't say where the poneglyphs are. So I'm kind of curious to see what we're going to learn when we get all of the Void Century. Is there some information that Rayleigh and Roger and the whole crew are gatekeeping from the world? Is there something that everybody should not know about, right? You know, minus the ancient weapons, minus, you know, the world sinking, is there perhaps something that is actually detrimental to the common citizen if they were to find out? I have no clue. But I think Oda is cooking here, like, for sure. Like, I'm not bashing it, right? I'm not bashing Rayleigh because we don't know everything yet. We are still working with an incomplete picture. Also, I just gotta say this right here too, but I think the editor note at the very end of this chapter is super freaking hard. It says, "Those who knew the truth just laughed." Hey, Laugh Tale hype, you know, Gold Roger hype, I'm excited. But what if they're laughing because they're coping though, right? Like think about the opposite, right? You know, I like to imagine they laugh because it's funny, but imagine if it's not funny. Imagine it's so crazy that they break down mentally and they just start laughing instead, like the Joker. I think that'd be kind of interesting, but I doubt that's going to be the case. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about all this. How did you interpret Rayleigh's words? Do you agree with Rayleigh that Vegapunk shouldn't be saying all of this? Or do you think no? Do you think it is beneficial that Vegapunk is dropping all of these details? So, going back a little bit because I skipped a couple of pages just to, you know, put all the Roger stuff all in one box. But as far as Joy Boy wanting people to inherit the ancient weapons, I thought that was really interesting. Because Vegapunk said, why would he want people to do that considering the fact that these are weapons of mass destruction? These weapons can ruin the entire world. What is Joy Boy thinking? And in my opinion, or at least in my headcanon, I'm assuming Joy Boy is of the same mindset as Frankie and Tom, right? Because Frankie, in his past, was building battleships. These battleships were for fun. You know, he loved them, he had a great time with them, but one day they were used for evil. Frankie hated battleships because of that. Tom beat some sense into him. He said, hey, battleships are just battleships. It's the people who use them that use them for evil. Or, you know, I'm paraphrasing here, but that's essentially what Tom was saying. And I feel like the ancient weapons are the exact same way, right? Pluton, yes, it's a weapon of mass destruction, but for the past 800 years, it's been chilling in Wano. And hey, maybe it has other uses as well. Maybe instead of being an island buster, maybe it could create islands, or maybe it's an amazing ship, right? It's the same with the Mother Flame. The Mother Flame is meant for everyday use. Vegapunk made it so that the world would have an infinite fuel source. And then what happened? York stole a part of it and then used it to fuel an ancient weapon that then destroyed Leloucia. And I think Shirahoshi is another key example of an ancient weapon that can be used for good. Shirahoshi doesn't want to go around destroying islands, and yet she's an ancient weapon, right? Like, that's just kind of how it is. I think while these ancient weapons can be used for evil, they can also be used for good. And I'm excited to see the designs of Pluton and Uranus, because I'm wondering if they are sentient to an extent, kind of like Shirahoshi, or if they're just straight up weapons. And another thing I do want to bring up is a One Piece video game, One Piece Odyssey. Didn't like the game, but I beat it. But Oda did play a key role when it came to storyboarding it and writing up a lot of events in the game. And one thing that we got there was the introduction of a fourth ancient weapon. They don't call it that, but they do say its powers rival an ancient weapon. And it's this weird dragon. It's a dragon, but it's also like this, you know, block demon thing. I don't know how to describe it, but it was sentient. You know, it had a will of its own. So because I played that game and because we do know that Shirahoshi is sentient, it makes me wonder if the ancient weapons all are sentient to an extent. But that's just like a little theory I'm playing with right now. And also, we do have the question of what was on Roger's ship, right? A lot of people are wondering what it is. Is it an anti-Uranus weapon, like the anti-Pluton weapon? Or is it maybe Uranus itself, right? We don't know what the hell was going on with Roger's egg. But hey, the fact that Roger had a giant egg on his ship could be another key instance of Roger not being born in the right era. Maybe that egg was key to the Void Century and defeating the world government, but since it hasn't hatched yet and hasn't matured, Roger couldn't do whatever he wanted to do. But yeah, that is my ancient weapon spiel. Past that, let me see, what do we have left? Oh yeah, York. York and that Den Mushi. So York finds a lot of things pretty suspicious. She's like, wait, Vegapunk knew that somebody stole the flame? Like, that doesn't make sense. Vegapunk was surprised when he found out that I was the traitor. And yeah, that's pretty fair, right? Vegapunk is not a great actor. He's not a great liar. So something was weird about that. And then Vegapunk knew about Leloucia. How did he know about it, right? And I think that's an interesting question. It makes it seem almost as if Vegapunk had a satellite that was outside of Egghead Island giving him information. Of course, that could be Stussy, since Stussy and CP0 kind of know about Leloucia, but we're not exactly too sure yet. But yeah, Vegapunk has been doing some money moves on the side, and York was really suspicious of it. So she says, you know what? Since Vegapunk knew that we would act this way, there's only one place where the Den Mushi would be, and that place is right next to the ancient robot. And then we pan over and we see that ancient robot tanking cannon fire, tanking bullets. And yo, the Gorosei, man, if they want to stop this broadcast, they now have to put this robot down once and for all. So there's a lot of things to talk about here. First up, I think it's pretty cool that this is the reveal. It's a reveal that I personally did not see coming. I know a lot of people were talking about it, right? This is a prominent theory in the community that the ancient robot had the Den Mushi, but I didn't believe in it 100%. And that's mainly because Vegapunk did not know how to work this ancient robot, right? When we first got here to Egghead Island, Vegapunk looked at this robot and he said, hey, I have no idea how this works. He said, I don't know what fuel source actually starts this guy up. So that's why I didn't believe in it, right? Because Vegapunk didn't know anything about this guy. So the fact that Vegapunk left the Den Mushi with the robot that he knew nothing about is pretty crazy, in my opinion. You know, like it's not something I would expect. You know, he put a lot of faith in this robot and into the notion that somebody would come around and boot this guy up. But yeah, I think it does make a lot of sense because when we first met Vegapunk 2, he was in the scrapyard. Why was he in the scrapyard? I don't know, right? Like, we literally popped in here. You know, Luffy stumbled around. Chopper was over here too. We saw the robot, and then Vegapunk just popped out, and he said, "Gazooks!" You know, like, woohoo! And it was like, okay, like, Vegapunk is here. That's a great reveal. But why was he here? You know, like, it was a question that I didn't see anybody ever ask. Nobody's ever said, hey, Sai, Vegapunk was over here because of this. Like, nobody's brought that up, at least from what I've seen. So it's really cool that Oda tied this all in together. I think that's an awesome reveal, and I'm pretty happy with it. You know, the Gorosei now have to run the fight, and I'm excited to see what dialogue we get out of it, right? Do they know about the ancient robot? Do they know how it works or what it can do? Because as of right now, we have no clue, right? The ancient robot has been up and moving for over 20 chapters. But none of the Gorosei have said a single word about this guy. The Marines off the coast every 2 seconds are like, goddamn, this ancient robot just keeps on walking. We can't hurt it. It's bigger than a giant. It's on fire, but it doesn't matter. Like, so many people have reacted to this thing except for the Gorosei, right? Like, none of these guys even know it's here from what we can assume. So I am definitely excited to see these guys actually pay mind to it. So as far as who's going to fight the ancient robot, based on the paneling, you know, York says, hey, Gorosei, it's with the ancient robot. We see Saturn, Mars, and Venus. Take note of it. So I think those are going to be the 3 Gorosei members that head off to fight the robot. Warkuri right now is still fighting Luffy or chasing Luffy, so I think he's pretty preoccupied. And as far as Jupiter goes, he's in the middle of the island sucking in Cyberpole agents, which I don't know. I mean, I saw that panel and it looks like he's killing the Cyberpole agents, but I doubt that's it. I don't think he's killing them. Maybe Jupiter is saving the Cyberpole agents. Maybe he is sucking them inside of his body, and his body is like Nora from Sky Island. All right, because Nora is the giant snake. And once Nora eats you, there's actually like a whole city inside of the snake. So maybe it's the same thing with Jupiter, or maybe he's sucking them in to save them from the fire, and then he's going to spit them out elsewhere. I don't know. What's weird about Jupiter saving them is that this is what I thought Kaku was going to do, right? Earlier in the chapter, I was like, okay, you know, Kaku, Lucci, he might save the Cyberpole agents. But if Jupiter is doing that right now, then I guess Kaku doesn't have to do anything. Or maybe if Jupiter is hurting them, Kaku stops him. And then we also have to remember that the Seraphim are right next to the Cyberpole agents. So is Jupiter going to free the Seraphim and have the Seraphim help them fight the ancient robot? I have no clue, you know, because what's interesting about the Seraphim and the ancient robot is that the Seraphim were touted as the strongest creations of the modern era. And then the ancient robot, I'm going to kind of assume it, but I think the ancient robot might be the pinnacle of technology back in the past. So maybe we'll have a clash between ancient technology and modern technology. I don't know, you know, I mean, hell, anything can happen at this point, right? Anything can happen. But yeah, we are going to get some pretty cool stuff next chapter. You know, we could get that Roger flashback. We could get the Gorosei versus the ancient robot. I think we will be getting the last parts of Vegapunk's message as well. And I want to pass the question off to you guys. What do you think is going to happen? What do you think about the ancient robots? What do you think about Roger? All this stuff. I would love to hear any and all of your opinions down below. But yeah, with that being said, that is it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for being here. I really freaking appreciate it. And I will see you guys in 2 weeks because there is a break next week. So yeah, my name is Sai, and I am signing out.